Remember when Thomas and Friends started changing? Like, really changing? New characters, new direction, new ideas that didn't always land the way fans expected? Well, Rebecca is one of the biggest examples of that. She came in during one of the most controversial eras of the show, and by the time everything ended, she was just gone. So, what actually happened? Why was she introduced in the first place? And why didn't she get to stick around the way characters like Gordon, James, Emily, or even Nia did? What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Finish Line, the series here on Thomas Fan 1984, where I deep dive into stories, characters, and the behind the scenes of Thomas and Friends. I'm your host, Kayla Marshall, aka Thomas Fan 1984, and today we're talking about Rebecca. So yeah, this is episode 3 of the series, and I'll be real with you, this one's different. Because unlike Gordon's Great Race, this is not about a movie. This is about a character who never really got her full story. So, before I get into part 1, I just want to let you guys know that I am completely revamping this series. Completely. Which means I will be giving you guys a better version of the series. I'm trying to explain how because trying to think of how to explain it exactly. So, you guys can see on screen that there's footage of the show and stuff on screen. That's how we're doing it now. Because I found out that CapCut, I'm actually recording this through CapCut. I found out that CapCut actually has their own teleprompter thing. So, yeah, we're going to be doing that. And yeah, let's just get straight into the episode. So, part 1, setting the stage. Let's rewind to 2018. This is when the show entered what's known as the Big World Big Adventures era, aka the WABA era. Now, this wasn't just a normal season change. This was a full-on shift on how the franchise worked. The goal was simple: make Thomas more global, introduce new characters, reach a wider audience, and basically keep the franchise relevant in a changing world. And with that change came Rebecca. Rebecca was introduced as a brand new engine working on the Northwestern Railway, a large yellow tender engine brought in to help Gordon pull the express and become part of the steam team. Now, on paper, that sounds fine. New character, new energy, new dynamic. But here's where things get interesting. She didn't just join the steam team. She replaced Henry. And that right there is where a lot of the controversy started. Because Henry wasn't just some background character. He was part of the original lineup. One of the engines that helped define the identity of the show. And instead of giving him a proper send-off or building Rebecca up slowly, the show just made the switch. One day Henry's there, the next, Rebecca's playing the express. Now, to be fair, the idea behind her character wasn't bad. She was written as a kind optimistic and eager engine to prove herself. She wants to be long, she wants to be useful, and she tries to see the best in everyone. But here's the thing. This all happened during a time when the show itself was still trying to figure out what it wanted it to be. The Big World Big Adventures era was all about change. New locations, international engines, faster pacing, more exaggerated storytelling. And in the middle of all that, you've got Rebecca, a brand new character, trying to find her place, in a show that was also trying to find its own. This was a version of Thomas and Friends that was actively reinventing itself while still trying to hold on to what came before. And Rebecca, she ended up right in the middle of that transition. So now that we've set the stage, the next question is simple. Who was Rebecca actually supposed to be? Part 2. Who was Rebecca supposed to be? Alright, guys. So now that we've talked about the era Rebecca was introduced in, and why her debut was already controversial because of the whole Henry replacement thing, now we gotta ask the big question. Who exactly was Rebecca supposed to be? Because this is where things start to get a little confusing. On the surface, Rebecca had all the ingredients of a solid Thomas character. She's cheerful, she's eager, she wants to prove herself, and she's got that whole new she had that whole new engine trying to fit in thing going for her, which honestly could have made for some really good storytelling. Her official character profile described her as a beat and enthusiastic, basically Rebecca the Happy Engine. And I'll be honest, that idea actually had potential, a lot of potential. Because if you think about it, Thomas and Friends has always done well when it introduces characters who have something to prove. Look at Emily. When she first showed up, she had purpose. She had personality. She had stories that helped establish who she was. Even characters like Ryan, for however underused he became later on, still had enough individuality early on for the fans to understand what his deal was. Rebecca, though, that's where things get tricky. Because while she had personality traits, she didn't really have much of an identity. And there's a difference. A huge difference. See, being cheerful is a trait. Being optimistic is a trait. Being eager to help is a trait. But those things alone don't make a memorable character. They're surface level. They tell us how a character acts, but not who they actually are. And that's where Rebecca struggles from the very beginning. A lot of her episodes focused on the same exact idea. Rebecca trying to prove herself. Rebecca worrying that she's not useful enough. Rebecca trying too hard. Rebecca learning she's fine the way she is. Episodes like What Rebecca Does pretty much centered around this exact concept. And while that's not a bad lesson, the problem is the show kept going back to it. Again, and again, and again. It felt like the writers never really figured out what to do with her beyond that. And honestly, that's frustrating. Because there was this real potential there. Rebecca's basis as a Southern Railway inspired tender engine could have opened the door for all kinds of stories. She could have had issues with wheel slip. She could have had a fascinating rivalry with Gordon. She could have had stories about proving herself on the Express in ways that actually challenged both characters. A lot of fans pointed out that she had strong potential, but was written too generically. That could have been great. Imagine if the show leaned into Gordon being skeptical of her, not in a mean way, but in a believable way. You could have this whole arc where Gordon doesn't think she's ready. Rebecca struggles, fails, learns, comes back stronger, and earns his respect over time. That would have been compelling. That would have given her identity. That would have made her feel earned. But instead, the show mostly skipped all of that. It kind of expected fans to just accept her immediately. Like, here's Rebecca, she's part of the team now, moving on. And that just doesn't work when you're replacing a major legacy character. Now, to be fair, this wasn't entirely Rebecca's fault. I think that's important to say. A lot of fans blamed her directly. Realistically, Rebecca wasn't the problem. The writing was. She was introduced during a period when the franchise was moving fast. The whole Big World, Big Adventures era was focused on introducing global characters, changing the cast dynamic, and refreshing the band for newer audiences. The 2018 relaunch specifically brought in Rebecca and Nia as part of that push. And because of that, there wasn't enough room for her to develop properly. She became more of a symbol of change than an actual fully realized character. And I think that's what hurts the most when looking at Rebecca. Because underneath all of it, there really was a character there. Potentially a great one. She just never got the writing she needed. And because of that, fans were left asking the same question for years. What exactly was Rebecca supposed to become? And that leads us to probably the biggest part of this entire discussion. Because if Rebecca never fully found her identity, then what happened when the original series reached the end of the line? That's exactly what we're talking about next. Part 3, Where Did Rebecca Go? This one's going to hit harder because this is where we get into our actual fate after the series ended. Part 3, Where Did Rebecca Go? Alright, so now we've covered who Rebecca was supposed to be. We've talked about the era she came from. We've talked about how she never really got a strong identity. But now we hit the part of the story that honestly feels the most strange. Because Rebecca didn't just have a rough introduction. She also didn't really have an ending. And that's what makes this whole thing feel unfinished. So let's talk about it. By the time we get to the end of the original Thomas and Friends series in 2021, everything starts changing again. The show wraps up its long-running CGI era. This same team, as we know it, starts fading out, and the franchise prepares for the full reboot into All Engines Go. And that's where things get weird for Rebecca. Because unlike some of the more established characters, Rebecca doesn't really get a send-off. There's no final big episode, no emotional goodbye, no moment where the show says this is it for her. She just stops appearing. And I think that's where a lot of people don't. And I think that's something a lot of people don't realize at first. Because when a long-running show ends or reboots, you expect closure for at least the main cast. Even if it's simple. Even if it's quick. Just something. But Rebecca doesn't get that. And it raises a pretty simple question. What actually happened to her? Now, officially, there's no in-universe explanation. Nothing in the show says she left Sodor. Nothing says she retired. Nothing says she was transferred or written out properly. She's just not there anymore after that point. And when the reboot happens, she doesn't transition into the new format either. She's completely absent from All Engines Go. And that just kind of tells you everything you need to know. Because in a franchise that has lasted as long as Thomas and Friends has, characters usually fall into 3 categories when these things change. They get carried forward, they get written out cleanly, or they quietly disappear. Rebecca falls into that 3rd category. And that's what makes her situation so interesting, because she wasn't a legacy character from the classic era. She wasn't someone who had decades of history. She was a relatively new addition, a modern era character, which makes her disappearance feel even more abrupt. And it kind of creates a strange gap in the timeline, because she was introduced as part of the future of the series, but she never actually made it into the next version of that future. She exists in this really specific window of Thomas history between the classic identity of the show and the full reboot direction that came after. And once that window closed, she didn't move forward with it. Now, some fans try to explain it in different ways. Some say she's still on Sodor, just not seen anymore. Some say she was effectively written out when the team was restructured, when the Steam team was restructured, and some just see it as a behind-the-scenes decision where newer continuity simply moved on without her. But no matter how you look at it, the result is the same. Rebecca's story doesn't have a clear ending. And that's really the core of this episode, because this is just about one character disappearing. It's about what happens when a character is introduced during a transition period, and that transition period itself gets replaced. She didn't belong to the original era, but she also didn't survive long enough to belong to the next one. So she ends up stuck in the middle. And honestly, that's probably the most fitting way to describe her in the existence of the series. So now that we've talked about where she went, the final question is that it's the one that actually matters for this whole discussion. Was Rebecca ever really given a fair chance? Or was she always just a character caught in a shifting direction she had no control over? That's what we're breaking down in the next part, the legacy of Rebecca. Part 4, Legacy and a New Beginning. Alright, so after everything we've talked about, Rebecca kind of ends up in this strange place in the franchise. Not really classic era, not really reboot era, just somewhere in between. And when you look at her as a whole, that's probably the best way to describe her legacy in Thomas and Friends. She wasn't around long enough to become iconic. She wasn't used consistently enough to build a strong identity. And she wasn't given a final moment that tied everything together. So instead, she just becomes one of those characters that represents a very specific period of the show. A transitional phase. Time when the series was trying to evolve, but wasn't sure what it wanted to carry forward. And Rebecca ended up right there in the middle of that uncertainty. Because when you really think about it, her entire existence is tied to change. She's introduced during a reboot-style shift in direction. She replaces an original character. She gets minimal development. And then she appears when the next big change happens. So it almost feels like she was never meant to have a long-term place, just a temporary one. And that's why fans still talk about her today, not because she had the strongest episodes, but because her situation feels unfinished. She's one of those characters that makes you ask, what if they actually did something more with her? And honestly, that question is where things get interesting. Because this is where I want to step in for a second. In my new series, The Journey Never Ends, Rebecca is going to be a part of that story and a part of that series. But not in the same way she was written before. Because I'm not just going to leave her as a background character or repeat the same I need to prove myself loop the show kept using. I actually want to give her something meaningful. A real direction, a real arc, something that builds over time instead of resetting every episode. If she's going to exist in this new continuity I'm building, then she's going to actually grow, not just exist. Because that's the part I feel like the original show never really committed to. If it had the pieces, it had the ideas, it just never followed through. So in The Journey Never Ends, that changes. Rebecca is not just the new Indian who replaced Henry. She's not just the cheerful one who wants to fit in. And she's definitely not just a forgotten transitional character. She's going to have her own identity, her own place on Sodor, and her own path that actually develops over time, and her own character development. And I think that's the most important part of all of this, because this whole episode of Beyond the Finish Line is not just about pointing out what went wrong with the original portrayal. It's about what happens next when you choose to continue the story yourself. So yeah, Rebecca's journey in the original series might feel unfinished, but in this new one, it doesn't have to stay that way. Because Rebecca's story in Thomas and Friends might be over, but in my version of Sodor, it's just getting started. So that's going to do it for episode 3 of Beyond the Finish Line. Rebecca's story might not have been fully told in Thomas and Friends. That doesn't mean it's the end of her story entirely, because sometimes characters don't really disappear. They just moved into a different track. And for Rebecca, the next track starts in The Journey Never Ends. So that's pretty well it for this episode. I do want to talk to you guys about... Okay, I don't know. You guys will see the finished product. If it's just the image of Rebecca, that's fine. If it's like the... Hell, I could even do like a thumbnail. I just put the thumbnail on screen. I was thinking about doing like full-on footage, but I don't want to spend all that time trying to, because, okay, whoa. I'm looking at this. It's going to be like over a gigabyte to export. That even 480. Okay, 480p. I could do it at 620, or not 620, 720, maybe. I'm just trying to save space. Also trying to make it so I can get this out soon. But either way. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to do footage for this one because this video is over 20 minutes long. So, but yeah, I might just do the thumbnail or an image of Rebecca. Either way, and not do the footage. If I do like shorter videos, I will maybe do footage, but for now, I'm going to do this. And I actually like it better this way anyway, rather than like, having like, me face to face and stuff, because me facing the camera and recording on StreamYard, because I can I feel like just recording this with CapCut and the teleprompter on CapCut, it's just better. I think that's how I'm gonna start recording videos like this from now on. I'm just gonna use the teleprompter and CapCut, So, yeah. I will see you guys in the next video. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and yes, guys, this series is back. I know I haven't made an episode since August 12th. Actually, the first 2 episodes came out on August 12th, 2025. Today is May 4th, 2026. So, you know how it is. If you guys want to see specific episodes, comment down below. I still do have, I'm gonna have to find the script, but I know I have the script to Gordon's Great Race Retrospective Part 2 written down somewhere. So, yeah. I did, script this video and stuff. I did have ChatGPT help me write it a little bit. And guys, when I say stuff like that, I mean like I write a lot of it. Sometimes I'll write most of it. I'll just have it, ChatGPT revamp it and stuff. Like the Journey Never Ends part, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm gonna talk about putting her in my own series, Journey Never Ends. But how do I do it? And it gave me that, so that works. This video is about 24 minutes long now, I think. So, but hey, I like doing these longer videos like this and these longer episodes, because these are this series deserves these longer episodes like this. So yeah, but yeah, so this is gonna be the format of the series from now on. Maybe I'll do do shorter, parts of the series where I could upload YouTube shorts, but I mean long form videos. I do like character bit type things where it's like a 3-minute thing where I talk about a character, so say like this, but it's like a lot shorter, anyway, like a summary of like a I don't know, I'll figure it out, but make sure to like, subscribe, comment, do all that good old stuff, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next episode with another one. If you got your own suggestions, if you want to see a character, if you want me to talk about a character or a one of the movies or something like that, like Misty Island Rescue or something, I will. But yeah, and also, guys, I'm just gonna ultimately decide to just do the picture on screen instead of the full footage because it's easier. Anyways, yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm gonna tell you guys my opinion on Rebecca. I actually don't mind her. I actually think she's a pretty cool character. It's just, I mean, I knew, all about, her not having much character development and stuff. But me, recording this video and, reading the script through and stuff, and then, doing, all the research and stuff for this video, I, and then, having ChatGPT also give me ideas. I'm like, okay, I didn't realize, that she was, this kind of character. And, I mean, it's true. That is the best way to describe her fate. She's not from the classic era, not from any, not from the Hit era, not from the Miller era, not from the Brenner era. She's from the Boba era, but she's also not part of the reboot. She's somewhere in between. She's I'm gonna just say this now. I think part of the reason why she didn't have much character development, and maybe that's why the writing team just wrote her in whenever they needed her. If her trying to prove herself and whatnot. It's just because maybe they just needed an extra character. But the thing is, I don't get. It's she was replaced. She replaced Henry to be part of the Steam team. Why did she not have more character development? She's a main character, basically. Why did she not have more, That's one thing I don't get. And one thing that kind of pisses me off that they did, she's a main character, but she's got no character development whatsoever. This video is actually almost a half hour now. It is now, oh no, it's 28:14. Well, no, it's over now. I'm looking on the thing, it says 18:14. I guess that's when just the last recording I did. But yeah. But yes, and I mean that. And the journey never ends. I am gonna, give her hell of a lot more character development. I'm gonna, give her a hell of a lot more. I'm gonna give her character development. I don't think she really had much, if at all, if in any at all in the original series. I'm giving her character development. She is, now I don't know what episode she'll appear in first. What her first appearance of this series will be, but yeah, I'll keep you guys updated and stuff, and yeah, I'm gonna tell you guys, again, like, subscribe, do all that good old stuff, and I want to hear you guys' opinions about Rebecca. Do you guys absolutely hate her, absolutely despise her? Or are you guys big fans of her, but she just never, got the credit and stuff she needed? And the thing is, I'm also thinking about now, Thomas Fan 2002's Trek to Big Adventures series. It was his first episode was about Rebecca. And, he gave her a hell of a lot of character development, because I actually remember watching that episode. And I can't remember, like, all of it, but I know he did give her character development. That's what I'm going to aim for, too, Sometimes it felt like, she was a background character, even more than, Henry and Edward after, they were placed from the Steam team. It seemed like Rebecca was right there with Henry and Edward. Although she replaced Henry, it still seemed like she was a background character, And, literally her engine roll call line is, she's new, but lots of fun. Rebecca, she's new, but lots of fun. Like, that's the only line they give her. They can't do, like, they're new and lots of fun. Yeah. Anyway, do you think this video is over a half hour now? But, yeah. I just want to talk to you guys about this stuff because I need to. Yeah. I will see you guys in the next video with another one. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, do all that good old stuff, and I'll see you guys in episode 4 of Beyond the Finish Line, and also the next episode. Or, yeah, in the next episode, then, just whatever other next video. So, yeah. I'll see you guys later. Bye for now. Haha, I guess I'm gonna make this video even longer. I just thought of another thing to say. I'm thinking about having an episode solely focused on Rebecca, but instead of, doing it like, she's trying to prove herself, I'm giving her character development. She's gonna have character development. I'm gonna have an episode focused on Rebecca herself, So, yeah. I will now see you guys in the next video. I just wanted to tell you guys that because I thought of that when I haven't even edited anything else in. I just thought of that. I'm like, oh wait, I should probably tell them that I'm gonna do an episode based, I'm gonna give her. I'm gonna do a Rebecca focused episode, no matter what. So yeah. Now I will see you guys in the next video with another one. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and see you guys in the next episode and in the next video. Bye for now.